Hello, sweet friends. Welcome back to the podcast. I am bringing you a topic today that has been coming up over and over again in my sessions with my private clients. And so my sense is it's coming up for many of you collectively. And it's this issue with time and really the concept of not having enough of it, enough time. So what we're going to dive into today is where where this comes from, the sense of not having enough time. And before you think it's just because I have too much to do, just listen in to the episode. You might understand it a little bit deeper on a deeper level. So we're going to talk about where this comes from, where it really developed from, and what it's doing to the brain when we have this thought that we don't have enough time. And then, of course, what to do about it. So I'm calling this time scarcity. It's scarcity like any other scarcity, right? The concept that there's not enough of something. That concept of scarcity, most of us are familiar with it when we think about finances or money, but we haven't really made the link with time. And I know some of my clients, when I name that for them, all of a sudden a light bulb goes off. They say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize that that is what was happening, that I didn't think I had enough time. They didn't realize it was scarcity showing up, scarcity consciousness or scarcity thinking. So let's start right here. So, time scarcity, or the thought that you don't have enough time, is this perception of exactly that, that there's never enough time to do what you want or what you need to do. What it ends up doing is creating a sense of urgency. And you might feel it in your body, like anxiety, like maybe a little bit of discomfort in your chest, like, oof, I got a lot to do, maybe even a panic. You feel that in your body or in your mind. And most of the time, it is, in fact, a perception. Not always, but sometimes. There's a behavioral economist, Sunday, and a psychologist, Elder Shafir, who coined the term scarcity mindset. In their book, Scarcity, Why Having Too Little Means So Much, they show that when we believe we're lacking anything, time or whatever it is, our brains go into this tunnel vision. So, specifically with time, what happens is we start hyper focusing on short term things and we lose the capacity for long term planning, but also for joy and for connection. So, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what's happening in the brain when we are in this sort of time scarcity mentality in just a bit. But before, I want to dive into the history of what this time scarcity is, or the time wound. The time wound, again, time scarcity, the thought that we don't have enough, where does it come from? So let's talk about the historical context, okay? So this is, for many, many people, this is an inherited trauma. It lives in our nervous system and in our body. Okay, so it's not just personal, it's usually cultural and it's usually ancestral. Now, I find that to be really interesting because there are some people that were born, and if I ask you to think back when you were a kid, I have some clients that I did this with. I asked her to think back as a kid, what was it like? And she's like, huh, yeah, my mom was always rushing me everywhere we went. Like, this client whose mom was Latina and speaks Spanish, she's like, I just remember her always saying, apúrate, apúrate, vámonos, vámonos, hurry up, let's go, let's go. And yeah, so then you inherit that as always never having enough time. You never had enough time as a kid, you never have enough time now. But where did your mom get that from? So again, she probably inherited that herself. So let's talk about history for a second. So during the Industrial Revolution, so this might be very basic for some of you, but for many of you, might be the first time you're hearing this. So during the Industrial Revolution, humans became these sort of cogs in a productivity machine. And the more you produced, the more money you made. So the more productive you could be at any given time equaled how much money you would make. So time equaled money, and how much you were worth depended on how much you could produce. And the more you produced, the more you were worth, or the more worthy you became. So time did become money, but then clocks also started replacing the natural rhythms of the way our body worked. And being idle, not doing anything at all, felt like completely unproductive, which meant unworthy. And also, it sort of became this kind of sin, and busyness became a virtue. And that is still something that affects so many of us now, where we have linked our worth with how productive we could be. I know so many people that have done such a good job of, optimizing all these areas of their life. They make time for exercise, they make time for their family, they make time for, things that things that they find to be productive. But the one thing they still struggle to make time for are things that bring them joy or resting, just resting at all. And when I look back and ask, they say, wow, I just feel so guilty when I rest. So if that's you, just know that you're not alone. It's so fascinating, right? Because this concept of productivity as a moral value was also reinforced by work ethic ideologies, right? These work ethic ideologies that linked hard work to salvation. Wow. If you think about who benefited by that, think about who benefited when you were told to work harder, work harder, work harder, work harder. You're not moral if you don't work harder. You're not going to be saved, if you believe in sort of that Christian ideology, if you don't work harder. And in many colonized and immigrant communities, survival literally depended on proving your worth, proving how productive you could be. So laziness didn't just make you feel guilty. Laziness could be fatal, and doing nothing was dangerous. So there was a time where it was not safe to rest and it could cost you your life. I'm going to say that again. There was a time where it was not safe to rest and could cost you your life. So if you're someone right now that feels guilty when you rest, or you feel so uncomfortable just sitting still for a little bit, you notice your nervous system feels dysregulated when you do that, it's likely something you inherited. It could be something you inherited and then normalized in your body. Now you've normalized these stress hormones going off in your body and feel like resting feels uncomfortable, but resting could also feel unsafe. Now, I know that's a story for so many people listening. So if this is your story, no, you're not alone. Oof, it was definitely my story. And I had to do a lot of work to get myself to a place where I could just sit still without feeling guilty. Oof. All right. So I want you to know again, this isn't you. You may have inherited this, and you may have inherited fear around time, fear around productivity. So this is definitely common in first generation professionals, first generation leaders. It's definitely common in children of immigrants. If you come from a marginalized community where you're constantly having to prove your worth or prove your legitimacy, you might experience this even more. But it is also true in high achievers. And high achievers that don't come from, they're not first gen, they're not children of immigrants, they're not from marginalized communities. They're just someone that always wants to achieve, always wants to create more, do more. Those folks also struggle with this. So what's happening to them? Okay, so we're going to zoom into the brain for a little bit and talk about what happens. So when we are experiencing this scarcity, what happens to our brain? So time scarcity activates the part of our nervous system known as the sympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is sort of more commonly known as the fight or flight response. When that's happening, when our sympathetic nervous system is activated, our parasympathetic nervous system, the part of our brain that tells us to relax, is completely turned off. So our stress hormones rise up, and they especially affect parts of your brain that you need to be thinking critically. So when your cortisol or your stress hormones rise, your prefrontal cortex, again, the part of your brain that separates you from all other mammals, but is also responsible for decision making, for creativity, for reflection, that part of the brain starts to go offline. It starts to turn off. And the part of your brain that takes over, the limbic system takes over, and that part of your brain is not the most evolved part of the brain. It comes from one of our more primitive part of the brain. It's not the most primitive part, but it is part of the primitive part of the brain. So when you are rushing from task to task, it's not that you can't slow down, it's that your brain is literally in this survival loop. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. I got to keep going. And your body believes it's keeping you safe if you keep going. It's responding to those stress hormones. So that's really fascinating, because in high achievers that don't have this, maybe didn't inherit this as a trauma response. What's happening with them is they have constantly created the sense of I got to do more, I got to do more, maybe from competition, maybe from continuing to achieve as a kid, maybe it was linked to them gaining their worth from their titles or their straight A's or whatever that is. And so what ends up happening to the brain is it gets used to the cortisol levels being really high. It gets used to that fight or flight response always being on. And so it requires a level of detoxifying from that. So when you do slow down to rest, your body's like, wait a second, it's not safe. I got to keep going. I don't rest. I got to keep going. So you also have a dysregulated nervous system. So survival mode is not designed for thriving. Survival mode is designed for emergencies. And this chronic sense of urgency creates this baseline nervous system dysregulation. It is not a strategy that we want to lead from. It is not a strategy that we want to build a business from. It is a trauma response. It is a trauma response. Survival mode, hyper urgency, time scarcity, that is not something that we want to continue to create from because we are not coming from our highest self, the best parts of us. We're coming from our fear response. All right, so how do we move past this? Okay, so most of you listening right now, your leaders, your entrepreneurs, you do not have, likely you do not have the same pressures for livelihood, for survival that our ancestors had. This means that we are really blessed because we have the luxury to heal this time wound. We have the luxury to heal this. But in order to do that, there are a few things that are important to note here. First of all, just choose, like, do I want to be someone that continues to come from like time scarcity, rushing all the time, always being in hyper urgency? Probably not. Very few people want to be like that, but you get to choose that for yourself. And if you're saying, yeah, I love that. I love always going. I love always creating. Okay, that's great. And I want you to know that there is a way to continue to create and continue to do without always rushing and what else do I have to do and feeling that pain in your chest. There are ways to be equally effective and also be fulfilled and also ensure you don't burn out. Okay, so if you are someone that wants to heal this, it's important to acknowledge a few things. First of all, something that I think is really important to acknowledge is the concept of time. Okay. The concept of time in our current society, what have we agreed? We have agreed that there are 24 hours in a day. Okay. So objectively, there are 24 hours in a day. That's it. There's only 24 hours in a day. That is true. But this concept of 24 hours in a day is relatively new when we think about the history of humankind. Modern humans have existed for over 300,000 years, okay? That's according to fossils and genetic evidence, and over 300,000 years. But the 24-hour day wasn't officially formalized until about 2000 BCE. So still a long time ago, about 4,000 years ago. But when you think about, how long humans lived without the concept of 24 hours, it was like over 98% of our human history. So for over 98% of our human history, we did not live with this concept of 24 hours. In fact, it was the opposite. We lived in sync with natural rhythms. Sunrise, sunset, the moon cycles, seasons, the migration of animals, not clocks. And this rigid 24-hour structure, it's essentially new in kind of the grand scheme of humanity. And that's okay. It does dictate, for many, it does dictate how we set up our time, and we need that time structure. How are we going to meet with people? We're not going to tell people, meet me when the sun starts to set, right? So, I mean, we could, but we don't do that. And so I just want you to understand that even though this is roughly new, isn't it bananas how it dictates our sense of worth, our sense of productivity, and how it's caused so much trauma and stress, the sense of urgency? Okay, just know that. Just have that in the back of your mind. Okay, but if we subscribe to 24 hours in a day, which we do, I do, because this is how we function in our society, this means that there is a finite amount of time. Okay, so that's true. And things objectively take time. Tasks take time. So if we only have 24 hours in a day, why are some people really overwhelmed? Why are some people living with so much hyper urgency while others have more time or are living these lives that are more expansive? Why is that? All right, so Let's break it down a little bit. For one, it could just be the amount of tasks. Now, most of you listening, if you feel like you don't have enough time, you're going to be like, yes, this is me. It's because I have too much to do. And that could be. So what's important here, it's not just the total amount of tasks you have, but why you have so many tasks. That's what actually matters. So I'm going to talk about a few just really common themes of why people have so much to do. And listen, for you that are listening, I am just scratching the surface. I am just barely scratching the surface. When I work with my clients, oh my gosh, the amount of things we uncover that creates that time scarcity for them, it's fascinating, it's deep, and it's varied. And so I just want to honor that because I'm only going to scratch the surface today, but just know that if you have time scarcity and I'm not naming something that you resonate with, I want you to know that's because this concept is very large, but to get it all into a podcast episode, I'm just giving you some common themes. Okay, so for one, why do you have so many tasks? Well, one could be that maybe you are someone that identifies as a people pleaser or a pleaser, or someone who struggles setting boundaries. So you might have a lot of tasks because you struggle saying no. You are afraid to disappoint people. I just did the boundaries episode last week, which is why this episode today is perfect because we just talked about boundaries. And if that is you, for my clients that struggle with that, they come to me and they say, I just need to be more productive. Teach me how to be more productive. I hear this all of the time. And, like, oh man, some of my clients, high functioning, just like everything scheduled to the T, neurotypical people, and they still think that they need to be more productive. And it's just so interesting because really the problem might not be you need to be more productive or you need to be more organized. The problem might be that we need to get to the root cause of your people pleasing and help you not just set boundaries, but honor your boundaries, practice your boundaries. One of my clients who was, oh my gosh, excelling at work, incredible, also a mom of two young kids. And she was feeling exhausted. She was feeling overwhelmed. And again, she thought her problem was she just needed to be more productive. And what was so fascinating is I remember we were talking through her performance report, and her performance report, oh my God, it was stellar. It was so good. And she didn't receive that as like, I think in order to continue to do that well, I have to do all of this stuff. And what we needed to heal for her or help her understand was that the busyness was not necessarily equaling to being more productive. Being busy does not equal being productive. I want you guys all to take that home. Being busy is just being busy. I know so many people that stay busy because they feel so guilty if they stop working altogether. Even if they're exhausted, even if they're not being productive, they just stay in front of their computer or continue to try to push out a last email even when they know this is not my best self. Why? Because there's so much guilt around not working, either not working a certain amount of hours or not, or oh my gosh, but it's not even 5 p.m. yet. I can't stop working. But being busy does not equal being productive. You know what does? Being effective. Being effective equals being productive. And so for this client, what was so beautiful is that once we gave her that level of awareness, she was like, holy smokes, I am so effective. And she was able to get done, she was able to get done 5 hours of work with what most people can do in 2 hours. It was really, really powerful to witness. And then she started setting boundaries. So things started shifting for her. Okay, so that's one big one. Another one could be maybe you have a lot of tasks because you might be someone that feels the need to be present in a lot of the things that your team is doing. So you have this tendency to just want to have your hands in everything. Maybe you want to have your hands in everything because you think it's making you a better leader. Maybe you want to have your hands in everything because you have this tendency to control things. And you're afraid that if you are not present, maybe things will fail. Maybe they won't know how to do it. Maybe things won't go the right way. So controlling tendencies, fascinating. So if you have a lot of things to do, it might be because you have your hands in too many things. Again, this could be from many things. One big reason this shows up is maybe a fear response, sometimes stemming from There could have been a time where you did need to control things a lot, maybe at a young age. And you don't necessarily need to do it now, but that's how you thrived as a kid. That's how you survived. And so now you've just sort of adapted that as a skill. This is just who I have to be successful. And it's not always because of that, but that is a big reason. And another one might be you're just afraid to fail. And you think that if you let something go and someone else is now responsible for it, there is no way they can do it as good as you. So that's a big one. And then what does this get in the way of? It gets in the way of delegating or trusting your team or building up your team. And it really gets in the way of you taking command. I think that's really important here. I heard this quote, I can't remember who said it, but this is not from me. This quote, which is, you have to, as a really strong, successful leader or an entrepreneur, you have to let go of control so that you can take command. And I just thought that that was so powerful because it's so true. The more you think you have to have your hands in things, the harder it is for you to see the bigger picture. I'm an ER doc by training, and what I think is so fascinating is when we have a code in the ER, an ambulance brings a patient in, the patient's heartbeat isn't working, and we have to bring them back to life. When we are running this code, the physician is the team leader. So I would go into that code room and I'm the team leader. But the physician is also the person that has to, what's called intubate, put in a breathing tube into the patient, because that's the first step. You got to have an airway and you have to be able to oxygenate the patient. So when I go into that code and all of this stuff is happening, I immediately know, okay, I know I'm going to have to intubate this patient. So I intubate the patient, and a lot of things are happening at the same time, but it is hard for me to have command of the entire situation when I am busy controlling one part of it, controlling the airway. So my job, as soon as I go in there, is get that airway in as soon as possible, step back and let go so I can fully take command of the entire situation. So I'm sharing that with you to give you a visual of how powerful it is when you release control so you can take command. It also just gives you more time. It gives you more time to think, more time to be creative. This is why it's so important for leaders to do this. All right. So those are just a few examples there. And I'm going to tell you that I said these three things, in a few ways for what we did with my clients to fix this, but I know that this is easier said than done. So if you see yourself in these examples, I just want you to know you are not alone. A lot of people struggle with these same things. And here's the thing, because so many of my clients have come to me, and maybe you too, maybe you have awareness that you struggle with boundaries and you've tried to change it, but things don't stick. If this is you, if you've tried or you keep reverting back or you have a belief that things are never going to change, I just want you to know that I want you to just be open to that being a limiting belief, a thought that is not giving you the results you want in life. Because here's the thing that solves this problem. And what I'm so good at doing with my clients is when they come to me, what we do is we deal with the root cause. I notice, and I can say, okay, I see that this is a habit for you. I see this. I notice this. And what we do is immediately get down to the root cause. We get down to the root cause and we are able to create healing for that root cause and solve it. So we are dealing with the problem at the root. And what that does is it ensures that nobody reverts back to those old behaviors that were not in service to them. And then, of course, it's the application piece. So how do I start setting boundaries, for example, or how do I delegate? And what's going to come up for me when I try to do that? Because those are the things that puts you back into those old practices that are not of service to you. So again, if this is you, you're not alone. Just know that. And what's so beautiful is that when you can heal or solve for the root cause, it's like taking out a weed. If you get it from the root, it doesn't come back. And that's really powerful. Okay, so what I was going into here is, why is it that some people don't have time? So those are some examples, but I'm going to give you one more reason why when you ask somebody to do something, or you, for example, why you may say, I don't have time. All right. So, okay. Number one, of course, it's objective, right? I talked about it. Time, we have 24 hours in a day. You look at your calendar, it's completely booked. So maybe you don't have time because you're doing too much. Okay. So the way you know that you're doing too much is by what you're doing and how you feel. Because let me tell you something. We show the world what we value by how we do two things. We show the world what we value by how we spend our money and how we spend our time. We show the world what we value by how we spend our money and how we spend our time. So if your calendar is booked, like objectively, you don't have time, look at your calendar, there's no time in there for anything, then what I want you to do is to notice, does your calendar reflect your values? Is it actually reflecting what matters to you? And if the answer is no, or it could be, that could be one way for you to assess, am I doing too much? The other way to assess is just, how do I feel? Am I feeling overwhelmed? Am I feeling exhausted? Am I feeling unfulfilled? Am I feeling burned out? That's another way for you to assess. Hold on a second. There's something that's out of alignment. All of those feelings are incredibly valid. It doesn't mean anything is wrong. That is just, universe or source or whatever you want to call it, giving you a little like nod on the head, being like, hey, hello, time for you to reflect on what actually matters to you, how you want to spend your time. So, of course, if that's you, if you're doing too much and your calendar shows that, then you get to ask yourself, okay, so how can I start to prioritize what actually matters to me and deprioritize what does not? Okay, so the second thing is, if you are someone walking around saying, I don't have time, now this one's going to be a little harder for some of you to hear, but it might be your biggest aha moment here. It's this, that many times we use the excuse, I don't have time, because it is a perfect excuse, because everyone has bought into the time scarcity story. Everyone has bought into time scarcity. If you tell someone I'm really busy or I don't have time, no one's going to question it. And you get to avoid a task, you get to avoid a boundary, you get to avoid a difficult conversation. But when we say I don't have time, when we say I don't have time, if it's not objective, like I looked at my calendar, I really don't have time, or even if it's not objective, when we say I don't have time, we mean one of three things. I'm afraid to do it, I don't want to do it, or that task does not matter to me. It's not important enough, or it doesn't matter to me. I'm going to leave you with that because I want you to be with that. I want you to notice next time you say I don't have time, really just pause and say, why am I not making time for this? Because if you notice, you always have time for the things that you say are important. You probably always have time for work, for your leadership meetings, for mentoring someone that matters to you. You always have time for the things that you have decided are priorities in your life that matter to you. So when you say you don't have time, pause and ask yourself, what do I really mean? Is it because I'm afraid to? Is it because I don't want to? Or is it because this thing does not really matter to me? It's not important enough to me. And just sit with that and see what comes up for you. Okay, sweet friends, we covered a lot of stuff today. Thank you all for being here. Now, if this resonated with you, I would love to hear what you are uncovering in your own relationship with time. Feel free to tag me on Instagram at Vanessa Calderon MD, or again, share this episode with someone who wants to hear it. And when you are ready to stop living with reaction and start creating a life that's aligned with your deepest values, remember, I am here to support you, and you have more time than you actually think. And of course, you are not wasting any time. You are always right on time. All right, sweet friends, I will see you next week. Adios.